A few years ago, I found myself stuck in a job I didn't love, surrounded by goals that felt out of reach. No matter how hard I worked, I couldn't seem to break through. Then, I came across this one book that flipped my mindset upside down, The Magic of Thinking Big. Today, I'm here to share how it can do the same for you. Preview. In this video, I'll share lessons from the book, how I've applied them, and how you can too, whether you're chasing career success, personal growth, or just a more positive outlook on life. Start thinking big. Big success begins with big thinking. It's a concept that David Schwartz masterfully unpacks in The Magic of Thinking Big. He reminds us that if you limit your dreams, you limit your potential. It's a simple yet profound truth. The boundaries we set in our minds are often the only barriers to the extraordinary. But breaking free from those limits requires more than just wishful thinking. It requires intentional action and a shift in perspective. I learned this the hard way. For years, I found myself stuck in a cycle of mediocrity, believing that small goals were the safe way forward. I thought aiming low meant fewer chances of failure, but all it did was keep me in a rut. One day, as I was reflecting on where my time and energy were going, I realized the problem wasn't just my goals, it was my thinking. Thinking big requires not only ambition but also the ability to envision a different future. I remember the moment I decided to challenge my limits. It wasn't some grand revelation, it was a quiet resolve. I started visualizing a life where I wasn't confined to just completing tasks for someone else. I saw myself as a leader, someone who could create value on a larger scale. That shift in perspective changed everything. It didn't mean I quit my job overnight or started making risky decisions. Instead, I began to take a closer look at how I was spending my time. Every hour felt like a resource I could either waste or invest. For example, instead of procrastinating by scrolling through social media or diving into endless emails, I began to prioritize tasks that aligned with my larger vision. The idea wasn't just to be busy, it was to be productive in ways that moved me closer to my goals. One of the first steps I took was reevaluating my daily habits. I realized I had been sabotaging myself by setting vague, uninspiring goals. Schwartz teaches that thinking big begins with daring to dream big, so I sat down and wrote out my biggest aspirations, no matter how far-fetched they seemed. At first, this exercise felt uncomfortable, almost unrealistic. But as I listed things like starting my own business or becoming a thought leader in my industry, I began to notice a shift in my mindset. These weren't just random ideas anymore, they became possibilities I could work toward. And the best part? This act of thinking big gave me a renewed sense of purpose, something that made it easier to stay focused and fight off the urge to procrastinate. Time management became a crucial part of this journey. It's easy to get overwhelmed when you start thinking big because the gap between where you are and where you want to be can feel daunting. I quickly learned that breaking these big dreams into smaller, actionable steps was the only way to move forward. For example, if my ultimate goal was to lead a team, my immediate steps included improving my communication skills and learning how to delegate effectively. Instead of letting the sheer size of my goal paralyze me, I focused on what I could do today. Schwartz emphasizes this approach when he says that big thinking isn't about magic, it's about consistency. Every small step you take adds up, and eventually, you realize you're closer than you ever imagined. Of course, procrastination was an ever-present challenge. I'd find myself justifying delays with excuses like, I'll start tomorrow or, I need more time to plan. But one of the most valuable lessons I learned from The Magic of Thinking Big is that action cures fear. The more I delayed, the bigger the task seemed in my mind, which only made me feel more stuck. So, I started forcing myself to take the first step, no matter how small. If I needed to draft a business proposal, I'd begin by jotting down bullet points. If I wanted to network, I'd send out just one email. These micro-actions not only helped me overcome procrastination but also built momentum. Schwartz's principle became clear: success doesn't come from perfect planning, it comes from persistent action. Another critical aspect of thinking big is learning to value your time. I had to confront some hard truths about how I was spending mine. For instance, I realized that multitasking, a habit I once prided myself on, was actually draining my productivity. Instead of completing tasks efficiently, I was spreading my focus too thin, which made everything take longer. To counter this, I started practicing time blocking, dedicating specific hours to deep work without distractions. This shift didn't just make me more productive, it made me intentional. Knowing that each block of time was directly contributing to my larger goals gave me a sense of control and motivation. As I began to see the results of thinking big, I also noticed a change in my confidence. Schwartz points out that belief in your ability to succeed is a cornerstone of achievement, and he's absolutely right. For me, this belief didn't come naturally, it was something I had to build. One strategy that helped was affirmations. Each morning, I'd remind myself of the progress I'd made, no matter how small. I'd say things like, I am capable of achieving great things, or every step I take brings me closer to my dreams. These affirmations, combined with visible results, created a positive feedback loop that made it easier to stay motivated and resist the urge to procrastinate. Thinking big also taught me to rethink how I approach challenges. Instead of seeing obstacles as roadblocks, I began viewing them as opportunities for growth. For example, when a project I was passionate about failed to gain traction, I didn't let it derail me. Instead, I analyzed what went wrong, adjusted my approach, and tried again. This resilience is at the heart of what Schwartz advocates. Big thinkers aren't afraid to fail because they know failure is just a stepping stone to success. Adopting this mindset helped me stay on track even when things didn't go as planned. Finally, I want to share a practical tip that has been transformative for me: visualization. Every evening, I take a few minutes to imagine what success looks like for me, not just in abstract terms but in vivid detail. I picture the kind of impact I want to have, the people I want to work with, and the life I want to lead. This practice keeps my goals front and center, making it easier to stay motivated and prioritize my time effectively. Schwartz's idea of thinking big isn't just about dreaming, it's about creating a mental blueprint that guides your actions. Thinking big isn't easy. It requires effort, focus, and a willingness to step out of your comfort zone. But as I've discovered, the rewards are worth it. When you start believing in your potential and taking consistent, purposeful action, you open doors to possibilities you never thought existed. If you've been holding back, I encourage you to challenge yourself today. Write down your biggest goal, break it into manageable steps, and take that first small action. You might be surprised at how quickly the magic of thinking big can transform your life. Believe you can succeed. For a long time, I struggled with self-doubt. I had big dreams, but when it came time to take action, I'd always second-guess myself. Thoughts like, who am I to aim for something bigger, or what makes me think I can succeed where others have failed, were constant companions. It felt safer to play it small, to stay in my comfort zone, where I knew failure wouldn't sting as much. But deep down, I knew that if I didn't make a change, I would never see the success I craved. Then, I came across a concept from the magic of thinking big that completely shifted my mindset. Belief triggers the power to achieve. Schwartz argues that without belief in yourself, you've already lost the battle before it begins. And I realized that this wasn't just a motivational cliche, it was a crucial truth. If I didn't believe that I could succeed, no amount of planning or hard work would matter. Success starts with the belief that it's possible. I decided to take Schwartz's advice to heart and start acting as if I already believed in myself. This wasn't about pretending to be someone I wasn't, but rather making the decision to show up and put in the effort, even when the doubt was still there. At first, this felt like a stretch. How could I act confidently when I wasn't sure of myself? But I started to take small actions, one at a time, each of them building on the last. I made the decision to show up, do the work, and trust that my efforts would pay off. Slowly but surely, something incredible happened. Confidence followed action. The more I took steps toward my goals, the more I began to believe in my own abilities. I realized that belief isn't something you wait for, it's something you build as you take action. And over time, those small steps turned into a snowball effect, with my belief growing stronger and my success becoming more tangible. One of the most powerful tools I found in building belief was affirmations. It might sound simple, but every morning, I began telling myself one empowering statement about what I was capable of. It could be something as simple as, I am someone who finishes what I start, or I am capable of achieving my goals. At first, these affirmations felt forced and even a little awkward. But as I repeated them daily, they started to take root in my mind. I began to notice shifts in how I approached my day. I was no longer waiting for permission to succeed or doubting myself at every turn. I was stepping into my power, trusting that I could handle whatever came my way. It wasn't about having all the answers or being perfect. It was about believing that I had what it took to move forward, even in uncertainty. This belief-building process also changed how I approached challenges. In the past, whenever I faced obstacles, I would retreat into doubt and fear. I'd question my abilities and wonder if it was worth it. But with my new belief in myself, I started to reframe challenges as opportunities to grow. I began to see every setback as a lesson, every failure as a chance to improve. It was no longer about being afraid to fail, it was about knowing that failure wasn't the end of the road, but a stepping stone to success. The more I embraced this mindset, the more I was able to push through difficulties and keep moving forward. One of the biggest breakthroughs for me came when I realized that belief isn't something you just have naturally, it's something you cultivate through action and consistency. At first, I didn't feel confident. I didn't feel ready for bigger challenges. But I acted anyway. Every time I did something that took me out of my comfort zone, whether it was reaching out to someone I admired, taking on a challenging project, or trying something new, I started to build belief in myself. Each successful step, no matter how small, reinforced my sense of capability. And over time, I stopped waiting for the perfect moment or for all my doubts to vanish. I simply took the first step, and then the next, and the next. Belief also became a key component of my time management and productivity. When I didn't believe I could succeed, I'd procrastinate, convincing myself that my efforts were pointless or that I wasn't capable of completing the task at hand. But when I began to believe in myself, I started showing up for my goals every day, even on the tough days. I started breaking down my larger goals into smaller, manageable tasks, and as I accomplished them, my belief grew. Instead of feeling overwhelmed by the sheer size of the task, I focused on completing one step at a time. I realized that belief doesn't mean having it all figured out, it means trusting that you can handle the next step, no matter how uncertain it feels. And with each step forward, that belief solidifies into something stronger and more powerful. A key part of this process was eliminating the negative self-talk that had been holding me back. Before I embraced the power of belief, I spent a lot of time in my head, doubting my decisions and questioning my abilities. But when I decided to believe in myself, I stopped letting those negative thoughts control me. Instead of saying, "I'm not good enough for this," I started asking myself, "What's the next action I can take to move closer to my goal?" This shift from self-doubt to self-empowerment was critical to overcoming procrastination. When you believe in your ability to succeed, procrastination loses its grip on you because you know that every step, no matter how small, is a step towards something bigger. Time management became easier once I truly believed in my own potential. I no longer wasted time doubting whether or not I could succeed. Instead, I focused on getting things done. Each day became an opportunity to prove to myself that I was capable of achieving my goals. And as I began to take consistent action, I felt a sense of control over my time. Instead of feeling overwhelmed by everything I needed to do, I was able to prioritize tasks that aligned with my bigger goals, knowing that each task completed brought me closer to success. Building belief is a gradual process, but it is one of the most powerful tools you can use to unlock your potential. You don't need to wait for the perfect moment or until you feel completely ready. You just need to take the first step, believe that you can succeed, and trust that the actions you take will lead you to the results you desire. Every morning, remind yourself that you are capable of achieving your goals. Repeat affirmations that reinforce your belief in yourself, and take action, even when the path ahead feels uncertain. The more you believe in yourself, the more your actions will align with your goals, and the closer you'll get to creating the life you envision. Act on your goals. The moment I realized that progress doesn't come from perfect plans but from imperfect action was a turning point in my life. For years, I was stuck in what felt like an endless loop of preparation. I would spend hours planning every detail of my goals, researching, organizing, and creating lists, without actually doing anything. It felt productive at the time, but looking back, I was just avoiding the fear of starting. Then I came across the idea in The Magic of Thinking Big that action cures fear. That line hit me hard because it was exactly what I needed to hear. Schwartz's point was simple: you can plan forever, but the only way to achieve progress is by taking the first step, no matter how small or imperfect it feels. When I finally decided to act on my goals, I didn't start by overhauling my entire life. Instead, I started small, and that made all the difference. One of my goals at the time was to advance my career. I knew I wanted to move beyond my current role, but the thought of taking on something bigger felt overwhelming. So, I broke it down into manageable steps. First, I signed up for an online course to build skills I felt were lacking. Then, I joined a few networking groups where I could meet people in my field. It was intimidating at first, walking into a room full of strangers, introducing myself, and trying to make connections felt way out of my comfort zone. But every time I took a small step, it got easier, and I started to feel momentum building. One of the most important things I learned during this process was that waiting for the perfect moment to start is a trap. There's always a reason to put things off, whether it's the belief that you're not ready, that you need more information, or that the timing isn't right. But Schwartz's message is clear: the perfect moment doesn't exist. Progress begins when you take that first imperfect step. For me, that step was reaching out to a potential mentor. I didn't have the perfect email drafted or a clear plan of what I wanted to say, but I hit send anyway. To my surprise, that person responded and agreed to a meeting. That single action led to a series of opportunities one never could have planned for, and it reminded me that action creates its own opportunities. Another lesson that stuck with me is the importance of breaking big goals into daily or weekly actions. When I was working on a personal project, the end result felt so far away that it was easy to procrastinate. To combat this, I started creating small, actionable tasks that I could complete each day. For example, instead of telling myself, finish the entire project, I focused on writing just one paragraph or brainstorming a single idea. These small tasks felt manageable, and completing them gave me a sense of accomplishment that motivated me to keep going. Over time, those little actions added up, and before I knew it, the project was taking shape. One of the biggest obstacles I faced was overcoming the fear of failure. Taking action means putting yourself out there, and with that comes the risk of things not going as planned. For a long time, this fear kept me stuck in the planning phase. But Schwartz's idea that action cures fear resonated deeply with me. I realized that the only way to overcome the fear of failing was to face it head-on. So, I started treating failures as learning experiences instead of setbacks. When a pitch I worked hard on didn't land, I took a step back and asked myself what I could learn from the experience. Instead of dwelling on what went wrong, I used the feedback to improve and try again. This mindset shift helped me see failure not as the end of the road but as a stepping stone toward success. Time management became a critical part of my journey. Once I started acting on my goals, I realized how easy it was to get caught up in distractions that didn't align with my priorities. To stay on track, I began using a simple method. Every evening, I wrote down the top 3 tasks I needed to accomplish the next day. These tasks weren't just random to-dos, they were actions that directly contributed to my bigger goals. By focusing on these priorities first thing in the morning, I ensured that my most important work got done before other distractions could take over. This habit not only improved my productivity but also gave me a sense of control over my time. One thing I've noticed is that taking consistent action builds confidence. When I first started, I doubted myself at every turn. But each small win, whether it was completing a task, learning a new skill, or making a new connection, reinforced the belief that I was capable of achieving my goals. Over time, those small wins added up, and they gave me the courage to aim even higher. It's like building a muscle. The more you practice taking action, the stronger your confidence becomes. Schwartz also emphasizes the importance of persistence. Acting on your goals isn't a one-time event, it's a continuous process. There were days when I didn't feel motivated, when progress felt slow, or when I faced setbacks that made me question whether I was on the right path. But I reminded myself that success isn't about being perfect, it's about showing up and doing the work, even when it's hard. On those tough days, I focused on taking just one small action. Sometimes, that was as simple as writing an email, making a phone call, or brainstorming ideas for 10 minutes. These small actions kept me moving forward, even when progress felt incremental. Taking action also taught me the value of accountability. One of the strategies I found helpful was sharing my goals with someone I trusted. This person became my accountability partner, checking in with me regularly and encouraging me to stay on track. Knowing that someone else was invested in my progress gave me an extra push to follow through on my commitments. Whether it was completing a task or taking a new step toward my goal, having that support system made a huge difference. Ultimately, the most valuable lesson I've learned is that action creates clarity. When you're stuck in your head, overthinking every possibility, it's easy to feel paralyzed. But when you take action, even if it's imperfect, you gain insight and learn what works and what doesn't. This clarity helps you refine your approach and move forward with more confidence. For example, when I started working on a passion project, I wasn't sure if my initial idea would resonate with others. Instead of spending months trying to perfect it, I shared a rough version with a small audience. Their feedback gave me valuable insights that helped me improve the project and make it more impactful. Taking action on your goals isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. Each step, no matter how small, brings you closer to where you want to be. The process is messy, and there will be setbacks, but those moments are opportunities to learn and grow. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that progress doesn't come from waiting, it comes from doing. So, whatever goal you've been putting off, start today. Take that first imperfect step and trust that the momentum will follow. Overcome fear of failure. Fear of failure has always been one of the biggest obstacles in my life. Every time I faced a challenge, the thought of failing was enough to make me freeze. What if my idea didn't work? What if I was rejected? Or worse, what if I embarrassed myself? For the longest time, failure was something I tried to avoid at all costs. It felt like a wall that I couldn't get over, and the fear of running into it was paralyzing. But then, I came across an idea in the magic of thinking big that completely changed my perspective on failure. Fear is one of the biggest barriers to success. Schwartz suggests we reframe failure as feedback, a stepping stone, not a dead end. This simple idea turned everything around for me. Suddenly, failure wasn't the end of the road, it was just part of the process, a lesson, a step forward. I started to see my failures in a different light. Instead of viewing them as final judgments on my abilities, I began to see them as valuable experiences that taught me something important. For example, I've had my fair share of projects flop, whether it was a pitch that didn't land, a product that didn't sell, or an idea that didn't take off. In the past, I would have let these failures define me. I'd think, maybe I'm not cut out for this, or this just isn't my thing. But after embracing Schwartz's advice, I started to realize that each no wasn't a failure in itself, it was a lesson in disguise. It taught me how to improve, how to get better, and how to adjust my approach. Every rejection, every mistake was a stepping stone, not a dead end. And with that mindset shift, I found myself becoming more resilient and more willing to take risks. One of the things that really helped me overcome the fear of failure was asking myself a simple question every time that fear crept in: what's the worst that can happen? And can I handle it? This question forced me to confront the worst-case scenario head-on and evaluate whether it was truly as disastrous as I imagined. Most of the time, I realized that the worst-case scenario wasn't as bad as I thought. Maybe I'd fail, but that didn't mean I'd be doomed forever. Maybe the project would flop, but I'd have learned something that could make the next one better. In most cases, the worst outcome was simply a temporary setback, not the end of the world. And I could handle that. This exercise helped me reduce the power fear had over me, making it easier to move forward and take action despite the uncertainty. It's easy to get caught up in the idea that failure equals defeat, but once you start reframing it as feedback, the fear loses its grip. The truth is, failure is inevitable. It's a part of the process, and if you're not failing, you're probably not taking enough risks. Success doesn't come from avoiding failure, it comes from learning how to bounce back from it. When I embraced this idea, I became more willing to try things, even if I wasn't sure they'd work. I started to understand that failure isn't a reflection of my worth, it's simply a part of the journey. I stopped allowing fear to control my decisions and started embracing challenges as opportunities to grow. One way I practiced overcoming this fear was by setting small, manageable goals that pushed me just outside my comfort zone. Instead of diving into something huge and overwhelming, I'd start with a smaller task that would give me a taste of success or failure without the high stakes. For example, I might start by reaching out to someone for advice, testing an idea in a smaller market, or taking on a project with a more forgiving timeline. These smaller steps helped me build confidence and reduce the fear of failure because I realized that I could handle whatever came my way. Over time, I built up the courage to take on bigger challenges, and with each step, my fear of failure diminished. Another important lesson I learned was to separate my identity from my work. In the past, I tied my self-worth directly to my success or failure. If a project failed, I felt like a failure. If I got rejected, I took it personally. But once I started seeing failure as feedback, I began to view it objectively. Failure didn't mean I wasn't good enough or that I wasn't capable. It just meant that I needed to adjust my approach or learn something new. This shift in perspective allowed me to move forward without carrying the weight of failure on my shoulders. I learned to detach my sense of self from the outcomes of my actions, which made it easier to keep going even when things didn't go as planned. Time management and productivity also became easier once I reframed failure. When I feared failure, I procrastinated. I'd put off tasks because I was afraid of making a mistake. But when I started to see failure as a necessary part of success, procrastination lost its grip on me. I understood that every task, every action, was a step forward, even if the outcome wasn't perfect. I learned to embrace imperfection and move forward anyway. Rather than spending time obsessing over potential failure, I focused on taking action and learning from the process. This shift helped me become more productive, as I stopped worrying about making mistakes and started focusing on making progress. Overcoming the fear of failure also meant changing how I viewed time. When I was paralyzed by fear, I would waste time avoiding tasks that seemed too daunting. But once I reframed failure as feedback, I realized that the only way to make progress was by taking action. Time became less about waiting for the perfect moment or the fear of making a mistake, and more about making consistent progress, even if it was messy. Every step forward, no matter how small, was a win. And over time, I started to realize that time spent in action, even if I didn't get everything right, was always time well spent. One of the key takeaways from this process was learning how to bounce back from setbacks. It's easy to feel discouraged when things don't go as planned, but the most successful people are the ones who get back up after falling. Failure doesn't define you, it's how you respond to failure that matters. When you start viewing failure as feedback, you begin to see it as an opportunity to adjust, learn, and improve. The more you embrace this mindset, the easier it becomes to take risks and pursue your goals with confidence. In the end, overcoming the fear of failure is about reframing how you view setbacks and understanding that they're an inevitable part of success. Fear of failure will always be there, but you don't have to let it control you. Instead of avoiding failure, embrace it as a valuable teacher. Every time you fail, you learn something new, and every failure brings you one step closer to success. So, the next time fear creeps in, ask yourself, what's the worst that can happen? And can I handle it? Chances are, you can, and when you do, you'll be one step closer to achieving your goals. The magic of thinking big taught me that success is 90% mindset and 10% action. If you can dream big, believe in yourself, and take small consistent steps, you'll be amazed at what you can achieve. So, what's the one big idea you're going to chase today? Share it in the comments below. If you found this helpful, check out my other videos where I break down powerful books like this one to help you grow, learn, and succeed. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next dose of motivation.